Today I'd like to continue my series on non-judgment as a spiritual practice and take a look at how justified your judgments against people's behavior or ideas really are, because the more justified we feel our judgments are, the more energy they'll hold, and the harder it will be for us to let go of that high energy judgment that we're so sure is correct. Now imagine that there were a couple of people in a large crowd near the finish line of a marathon, and one person was saying, "My wife is volunteering for this marathon and she's going to have to stay until the last person finishes. I can't believe they let people enter the marathon when they're going to take so many hours to finish. It's crazy." And the other person kind of agreed with them and was commiserating and so on. And so how do we feel about this? Does it make sense for us to imagine that there's a particular amount of time that we should allow a contestant in a marathon to be officially acknowledged in their finish? Or should we let everybody that wants to run in the race run as best they can, even if it will take a good long time for them to finish? A judgment against someone or some idea is kind of like that line of how fast someone ought to be able to run the marathon, and slower than that just doesn't make any sense. I think that most of us would agree that just to finish a marathon at all is quite an achievement. And so I think this is a pretty good analogy for the value of our judgments. Now, let's imagine for a minute that we actually had a way of measuring the relative merit of an idea or an action on some kind of a scale. And Dr. David Hawkins has actually created a logarithmic scale of consciousness from 0 to 1,000. And using kinesiology, he actually calibrates many things, including ideas, people, actions, and so on. And so there actually is, if you believe in his understandings of how kinesiology works, the potential that we could actually have a way of measuring relative merit, just the way we could measure how fast someone is able to finish a marathon. So let's just say, for the sake of argument, for this video, there is such a method of understanding correctness relative to some other action. Well, even if we think those measures are correct, how are we going to draw the line of right and wrong? Where are we going to draw the line for either that runner in the marathon or for a person who is condoning a particular action or taking a particular action that we don't like, or has an idea that we think is just clearly wrong? I mean, isn't it true that there's certain ideas and behaviors that just seem totally wrong? And so how can we not hold a strong energy of judgment against them? Well, it's really just as absurd as trying to draw that line in the race of the marathon, really, because everyone is actually doing the best they can to understand their world to come up with ideas that they think are true. Their past experiences are coloring what they can believe as true and what they cannot believe as true. Even their paradigm of human behavior, whether we are inherently loving and caring people who are sometimes stray from our norm, or they may have the view of humanity that everyone's inherently selfish and greedy, and when they are generous, it's an anomaly. These kind of assumptions are difficult to really say which one is correct and which one is incorrect. And even if you could say one is more correct than the other, how can you judge someone that has actually taken the opposite view? Have you lived in their shoes? Were you raised by their parents? Were you in the same situation as they were, if they, for example, suffered abuse and so on in their upbringing? Our behaviors are exactly right for each of us, and our ideas that we even can believe in, including, for that matter, this video you're watching now. Some of you will think it's completely ridiculous. That's okay. You're just not ready to accept this particular set of concepts to help inspire you to have a less challenging life for yourself. That's all right. There are other ideas that may be helpful to you, even if this one isn't. So we can look at examples, and it's helpful for each of us to look at the examples of things that we judge as wrong or bad, and look deeply into the possibility of how other people could actually believe those things when you can't see that understanding. And as you do so, you may find that you'll find ways of understanding that includes the possibility for that particular view, which is the opposite of your own. So that would take some of the energy out of the process of judging that particular belief or action. And if we use that same technique with enough of our judgments, we may come to the conclusion that I've come to, which is really there's no clear way to draw that line. There's no right or wrong, good or bad. There's no absolute. There's no way to draw the line on that scale of consciousness, even if you use, as I say, Hawkins' technique. If an idea calibrates at 999, of course, it's as close to the truth spiritually as possible. But we can't expect anyone to live at the absolute most highest energetic level of truth with all their actions and beliefs unless they are so enlightened that they can't help themselves to be that way. Unfortunately for us, most people fall way below and are more likely to be in the 200s on his scale. And this is the terrible area of suffering that so many of us live in. So I think compassion for the person that has a belief that isn't helpful to them or to the people around them is a much more fruitful and peaceful way to react if you can practice non-judgment long enough to come to that ability and perhaps eventually even that habit of thinking around the tendency to make judgments. So again, if you resonate with some or all of this video, please give me a thumbs up down below and subscribe to see future videos.